And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford, and you already know I'll be joined shortly. Well, let me actually join shortly. You know who's already joined me on the podcast? Harrison Brown, Total Sports Live, Nick Earnshaw, Total Sports Live, Wilmington Blue Codes, WIP. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The fellas are back again here on the podcast as we're about to talk about some NFL football. Preseason footballs here. Last time we talked to you guys, we were talking about what NBA free agency just starting and getting prepared for the summer league, and now we're past that point, and now we're getting closer and closer and closer to regular season NFL football, which is always a good thing because then that means there'll be football on NFL. Let me not say football, it'll be NFL football on every Sunday. We'll have fantasy for those who play fantasy football. We do here. We'll have fantasy. There'll be a lot of sports betting, just a lot going on for the next, few months here on the podcast. So we're excited to get started here and getting underway talking about preseason football. However, before we do that, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live. Make sure you're checking out the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you can find your podcast. And lastly, Anchor.fm. If you have been checking out our podcast on Spotify, we've been uploading a video as well. Shout out to Harrison for finding that little neat gadget there to uploading the video, so you can listen to us but also see us if you want to as well. But like I said, we're back at it again here on the podcast. Make sure you check out totalsportslive.com as well. Got some stuff in the works as we always do. So fellas, let's get underway. You already know, like I said, Harrison, Nick joining me on the pod. Appreciate you fellas taking the time out on this Tuesday night to record as we getting prepared for week 2 of the preseason. But before we do that, we gotta look back at week 1. But like I said, appreciate y'all. How's everything going?
Man, great to see you guys as always. Everything's good on my end. Excited to talk some Eagles football with y'all. This is right in our wheelhouse, so let's get into it. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, I agree with Harrison. I'm excited to be here once again on the TSL Podcast. It's always a great time to talk some Eagles. It's getting closer to that time, a little bit closer, week 1 of the regular season, fantasy, all that good stuff. I'm excited to talk some birds.
I think we're all excited to talk about the Eagles, especially seeing how last season went, the highs and the lows. If you've been listening to the podcast, you probably have heard our highs and our lows and the rants and the non-rants. We had it all. The highs, the lows, them making the playoffs last year, surprisingly, them getting blown out in the playoffs and knowingly. Then them having a nice offseason, catapulted to now we're here in the preseason where the Eagles, they opened up the preseason last Friday night against the New York Jets. They suffered a 24-21 defeat at the Link. But as we all know, preseason is not about the final result. It's more so what guys do. It's what so much the improvements that you see from guys from last year to this year, from what they should be working on in the summer and bringing it over into real live game action. So let's dive right into it. Y'all. Overall thoughts. Just want to get y'all thoughts on just the game in general, specifically the first team offense and defense, which I think gave Eagles fans on last Friday, a lot of excitement to see and a glimpse of what could potentially be. Because both, and y'all would agree with me, I think both sides definitely set a tone to what we could potentially see from them this year. And if it's anything like we saw, Eagles could make some noise this year, not only in the NFC East, but potentially in the NFC.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the first team offense looked clean and efficient. I think that was definitely encouraging to see. The drive that they put together early in the game, the Goedert touchdown, I thought Jalen controlled the game well, looked accurate and precise. Like you said, Jovan, it's definitely some things to be excited about for people that are watching the Eagles this year. I think it's a legitimate roster. And I think we saw some glimpses of that in the preseason. Like you said, it's just the preseason, not really worried about the loss. I think that it was definitely encouraging, though. Defensively, I thought the same. I thought the defense looked improved. There's definitely still some holes. It's not a perfect defense when you look at the secondary, the linebacker core. It's not perfect, but it's definitely improved from where it was last year. I think it's a group that's going to take some step forwards, especially in the pass defense. That's somewhere they really struggled last year. And then in the run game as well. I mean, you pick up Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, your run defense is going to improve. So, like you said, Jovan, I definitely think there's some things to be excited about.
Yeah, I'm with Harrison. I think there's going to be a lot to go forward with this team. I think defensively, they're much improved. I'm still a little bit skeptical at where the safety position is at right now, but I think where they are with the linebackers, I think they're much better. We haven't seen a linebacking core with the Philadelphia Eagles like this in a very, very long time. I think they upgraded on the defensive line. Hopefully, they can generate more pressure than they did last year. I think they will, because we know how they didn't blitz a ton with Jonathan Gannon last year. I think they kind of addressed that through the draft. And with these linebackers, with Reddick as well in free agency. So I think they definitely improved on the defensive side of things. They also go and get another quarter in Bradbury to go alongside Darius Slay and Avonte Maddox, who will play a lot in the slot. Offensively, I thought Hurts looked pretty good. I mean, I think we're going to see some improvement this year. I mean, you've seen throughout the entirety of the offseason, he looks bigger, he looks stronger. He has a number one target, AJ Brown now. I mean, that is huge for a young quarterback in his development. He's so young. He just turned 24 the other day. So I mean, he's such a young quarterback in this league. So just give him a chance. And with that offensive line, I think the Eagles are going to be a much improved team. I think they're a 10-win team this year. Hurts looked really good, I think, throwing the football. It's training camp and preseason. We hear all the noise about what's going on in training camp. We hear, what's happening with his arm strength. Did he look great today? I don't care. I'm waiting for week 1. I want to see AJ Brown. I want to see Devontae Smith out there. They have a good running game. I think that was just a precursor. You get a couple of snaps in week 1 of the preseason. I think they're going to be okay, barring any crazy injuries. The Eagles, listen, they look like a serious threat this year for sure. It just depends on what they get out of Hurts, and I thought he looked pretty good.
He definitely did look good, and I want to actually go back to the offense, but let's talk about that defense. You guys mentioned it. They look pretty solid, and specifically, like we talked about, and like y'all mentioned, the linebacker unit looks very much improved. They added Hassan Reddick, but he's more so an edge rusher. They get, like you said, Nakobe Dean, who looks like, I don't know if people thought he was going to come in and start day one. That's not going to happen. But for him to even be, your backup, that tells you that's a good sign for what you can see, going forward from, your linebacker unit. Obviously, TJ Edwards, who's been pretty much a diamond in the rough still by them at undrafted. But the guy who made the play, Nick, was none other than Kazir White, a very underrated free agent signing that a lot of people wasn't really talking about. It was just kind of like, oh, the Eagles signed linebacker Kazir White to like 1 year deal. It's like, oh, cool. Let's see how he kind of works out. No, we're seeing in their obviously they got a guy who can not only help in the run game and stop in the run, but, and this is something that the Eagles haven't had in a while, that he can also cover in the passing game. And that, I think, is going to be a very huge difference maker for them, because as we talked about, numerous times on this podcast for I don't know how many years, about the Eagles linebackers just getting destroyed by the opposing teams, tight ends or even slot wide receivers, running backs out the backfield. Now they seem like they have that person who, like I said, is a legitimate 3-down linebacker, can stop the run, but also help you out in passing coverage.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I think when you go out and get Kazir White, that's another upgrade. They went out and upgraded this offseason. That's what they had to do. They did it through the draft. They got younger. They got a guy, Nakobe Dean, in the 3rd round to pair alongside Kazir White. Reddick's going to come off the edge. They got a lot better on the defensive side. They had to go out and get guys that can generate pressure. That's what they had to do, because clearly the Gannon's not going to rush or blitz, a ton all the time. So you got to get guys that can get to the quarterback and clog up the holes as quickly as possible, like Reddick, like Jordan Davis, who I can't wait to talk about a little bit later. I mean, these are guys that are going to step in right away and make a difference and generate a pass rush, generate stopping the run. So I think you go get a guy like White who can drop back into coverage as well. And you also get a guy who, who's able to, be an upgrade. I mean, you had Nate Gary just a few seasons ago, Alex Singleton. I mean, these are upgrades over these guys. And Dean, in Kazir White, I mean, Reddick, you still have TJ Edwards, who had a really good season last year. So I'm looking forward to definitely seeing this defense, put their best foot forward. I think they're going to be a much better team than last year. And you got guys like Jonathan Gannon wanted. So we'll see what happens.
Exactly. The Eagles went and got the pieces. So now you think again, there's no excuses. There's no excuses for this defense to not be much improved and to not have a opponent's completion percentage of almost 70% this year. There's no reason why they shouldn't have that, this year. It should be lower this year. Speaking of no excuses, Harrison, everybody thinks, or a lot of people were coming into this offseason, coming into this summer saying, hey, Jalen Hurts, he has AJ Brown now. He has Devontae Smith. There's no excuses for him to not be better than he was last year. Well, I think Jalen Hurts has done a good job of not taking, as he said, the rat poison and not listening to the, critics on the outside noise and put together a pretty good drive in, his first series. Like we said, he was 6 for 6 for 80 yards, a touchdown. His yards per average, we're talking about 13.3, which is not too shabby for those who are out there counting. He did a great job, I think, of moving the ball, taking what the defense was giving him, obviously moving the pocket a little bit, taking off and running when it was there, even though he took a crazy late hit out of bounds by Quinnen Williams, who Robert Saleh was not happy at the end of the game, and his press conference was not happy with Williams doing that. Obviously, no AJ Brown didn't get no catches, but we did see a touchdown run from Hurts, which was called back, and we also saw Dallas Goedert, make his presence felt in that opening drive, scoring a touchdown. And yeah, I think if you're an Eagles fan or you watch the Eagles, I think again you have to be very impressed from what you saw from this first team offense, and hopefully maybe we'll continue to see that on Sunday against the Browns if the first team plays, because they do have a joint practice coming up, against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think even if Jalen doesn't play this weekend against the Browns, I think we can take what we saw from against the Jets and use that as a positive. I think he looked clean out there. I think his mechanics looked improved from last year. I think that he was pairing his footwork with his upper body mechanics very well. That's something I noticed early in the game. And like you said, it was just a clean drive. I mean, 6 for 6. The Goddard touchdown is obviously a very nice play. Moving the pocket very well, moving around in the pocket very well. I think what I'm looking to see from Jalen in this preseason / joint practices and even early in the regular season, it's just some clear steps forward. I'm not looking to see anything crazy. I'm not looking for 300, 400-yard passing games, nothing like that. You know what I mean? Let's just see progress. Let's see protecting the football, which he did well last year. He didn't turn the ball over much. It was one of the lower turnover rates in the NFL for Jalen Hurts. I just want to see him take those steps forward. Maybe complete a few more deep passes this year. That's something that he could definitely look to do. It's not a matter of arm strength for me with Jalen Hurts. He has the arm to throw the ball downfield. He attempted, I think, the 9th most deep passes over 20 yards last year. That's not really my concern. It's more about completing those deep passes. And I think adding someone like AJ Brown, who can make plays over the middle of the field, I think that's going to really help Jalen Hurts so it doesn't have to always just be vertical. But yeah, like you said, Jovan, definitely encouraging. I think that's a great first game, great opener to the 2022 season for Jalen Hurts. Undoubtedly a big year. I mean, we all know what the expectations are for him this year. This is a big year. The contract is not up this year, but it's starting to get to that point where we're talking about it. You know what I mean? What's that contract going to look like? What's the end of that rookie year or rookie deal? What are we going to do then? So definitely a big year. Definitely going to be a lot of eyes on Jalen Hurts, but a nice start to the season for sure.
For sure. And you mentioned, like you said, for him, we know if you remember going back to even his time at Oklahoma the one season, that he does have the arm strength to put the ball out there and get it down the field. But like you said, and I think this is something that I think we saw, in this first preseason game with the mechanics, right? You can have the arm strength, but if your mechanics are not set, you can't make those completions down the field. You can if your feet not set. You're not, stepping into your throws. You're throwing off your back foot. Not saying he was doing this, but I'm saying if you don't do those things, you're not going to get those. You're not going to get those completions. So, like you said, if he stays true to his fundamentals, which I think he will, as we've just seen, just through his time at college and how he became a better passer from Alabama to Oklahoma, and now he's in the pros, and I think we're going to continue to see that because he now has the same head coach, the same OC, the same everything for the second year in a row, which he haven't had. If we continue to see that development, then things, I think, like you said, will work out, for them and for him. Like you said, even if he doesn't, play on Sunday, I think if he have a great, joint practice, but I think Nick Sirianni's probably hoping that those guys perform well in the joint practices so they don't have to, throw them out there on Sunday afternoon. So hey, great opening start, for the first team offense and defense, and let's see how they carry it going into this Sunday's game, few days from now against those Cleveland Browns. But before we talk about that, looking forward to Sunday's game, we got to talk about anybody else that stood out to us, fellas, because obviously we know preseason is just not about what Jalen Hurts does or what Josh Sweat does or what AJ Brown does or what Devontae Smith does who didn't play, but just saying those type of guys. Also, preseason is also meant for us to see, the depth of your roster, who's that, diamond in the rough, who's going to be that, backup, fourth corner, who's going to be that backup tight end if, someone gets hurt or, he's a red zone weapon, who were just some of the guys, starting with you, Nick, that, that stood out to you in the preseason opener, and following along with that, is there anybody that you would like to see this weekend coming up in Cleveland?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could go on at length. Going to be a guy who's going to be a huge part, a first round pick with the Eagles. I've gone on and on about how great he looked. I mean, he had 3 guys trying to block him. I mean, he just looks like a menace. But no, some other guys. One player in particular that was involved with Jordan Davis a little bit in the viral video, Cam Jurgens. I'm really excited about his development. Replacing Jason Kelce is not going to be an easy thing to do. He looks like he emulates a lot of what Jason Kelce has been and what he's done in the past. So I'm excited about him. I think he's a player who is similar build to Jason Kelce, can get down the field a little bit as well, works well in the trenches. That could be a pairing between him and Hurts. We see for a while after Jason Kelce, finishes his career here with the Eagles. Probably this could be his last year. I mean, we've been saying that for the past couple of years. But I think drafting Cam Jurgens when people were saying, hey, we want Nakobe Dean in the second round, which we eventually got him in the third round, the Eagles did. So, getting Cam Jurgens, I think is going to be huge. I'm still looking at his development. Just the first time he's been out there in an NFL game, got some, an opportunity. So I'm looking at Jurgens as a player to continue to watch, especially if players get hurt along that offensive line. And you have such a deep offensive line, so much depth there, in the backup position at the guards and tackle spots as well. So I think the way the Eagles have drafted and continue to draft good offensive linemen year in and year out, Cam Jurgens is another guy that you're going to see down in the trenches, probably take over for Kelce at some point, who was, I think, handpicked basically by Kelce. That's one player I'm still continuing to watch and saw a little bit in this last preseason game.
What about you, Harrison? He brings up a good one in Cam Jurgens. Jurgens, he got thrown into the fire going up against the first team defense of the Jets and definitely held his own. And we saw a lot of clips on social media of him, getting out in the run game, getting out on the screens, mowing guys over, which is always a great thing to see from your young offensive lineman who could be your, like you said, the future center of this offensive line. What about you, Harrison? Who stood out to you, and who are you looking forward, to seeing more of when they take on the Browns on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely echo your guys' sentiment. Cam Jurgens looked great. I know Ross Tucker was talking about it a lot during the broadcast, but he did. He looked outstanding, very athletic. Definitely, like Nick said, someone I'm going to keep watching. Heading to the defensive side of the ball, I like 2 of these young corners. They both caught my eye. We'll start out with Zack Mcpherson, 4th-round pick last year, a guy who we'd all like to see make some plays this year. I thought he looked good in the preseason game. I thought he did a nice job mirroring receivers. Obviously, the Eagles' cornerback room as a whole has definitely improved. It's probably the best it's been, in a very long time right now with Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox, James Bradbury. But you can never have enough corners. In the NFL, we've seen it year after year, like who's been out there at corner for the Eagles week 15, week 16. Injuries are a part of this game. So if Zach Mcpherson, Tay Gowan, the guy they got in the Zach Ertz trade last year from UCF, was actually going to sign with the Eagles originally as an undrafted free agent that year, but the Cardinals wound up drafting him, I think, late in the draft. So he went there. Eagles wound up trading for him mid-year. So Tay Gowan's a guy the Eagles have liked for a while. He's a guy that I could see making the 53-man roster. A nice rangy guy, rangy corner, another one, mirror receiver as well in that game. So that was really encouraging for me to see. I would love for the Eagles to have a very deep corner room this year, and I think those two guys can make it. That would be great. Jovan, you mentioned a few guys we're looking forward to seeing next week. I'll start out with Devin Allen. Just interested. It's a deep roster right now. We're still in the early parts of the preseason. Not sure that he's 53-man roster ready right now, obviously, but I'd just like to see the ball in his hands. I'd like to see him make some plays. Jovan and I were talking during the game at the end of the game on that last play. Jovan was like, "Hey, bubble screen to Devin Allen. You know what I mean? Let's see what he's got. Put the ball in his hands. Let's see." So I'd like to see him, like Jovan said, maybe get a bubble screen, maybe just a quick little hitch. Just throw him the football. Let's see what he can do. It's a long shot. Kind of reminds me of some of the AFL guys that got in the league, Harvey Benford with Green Bay, Malachi with Chicago. Like, just throw him the ball. Like, you know what I mean? Just once or twice. It don't have to be 3 or 4 times. Tiger Jones with the Eagles back in the day. Let's just see what they can do with the ball in their hands. And then just to wrap it up here, I'll say Carson Strong, quarterback. I'd like to see him in. I'd like to see him get the third-string reps behind Gardner Minshew. I'd just like to see what he can do on the field this week versus Cleveland. I think he's a very interesting quarterback, big, strong guy. A lot of arm strength, really talented arm. Definitely would be interested to see Carson Strong this weekend as the third quarterback.
Those are all great options. I mean, we're touching them all, right? We got the offensive lineman, Cam Jurgens. We got quarterback, Carson Strong. We got DBs and Zack Mcpherson and Tay Gowan. We got Jurgens. I mean, Devin Allen. We pretty much, I think we've kind of listed everybody who I think we could make a list of, going into week 2. I think for me, I think one guy that stood out to me in last week's game was Jason Huntley. I think, he did a great job of kind of, being the team's like, I think he carried the ball the most out of all the running backs, 16 carries for 48 yards. It's not a great yards per carry. He's only 3 yards per carry, but not horrible. But seeing him also be effective in the passing game, I think is huge. 4 receptions for 39 yards. When you do the math, 48, 39, that's about 97 total yards, give or take. That's pretty good. So just seeing him, I think, be more part of the offense, I think it's a very good sign to see, because there is no Jordan Howard this year. Obviously, we know the Eagles carried 4 running backs on their roster last year, and with Sanders, Scott, Gainwell, and Howard, and even Huntley. I think Huntley was on the roster just in general, but seeing him being more than just the special teams, kick returner, seeing him actually be involved in the offense, I think that was, was a good sign to see. And another guy I think, that stood out and I want to see, a little bit more of was Noah Togiai. He, Reed Sinnett, he was okay. There was some rough around the edges, but he always seemed to go to, Togiai, in certain spot situations. And this was a guy I remember when the Eagles signed him as an undrafted free agent a couple years ago. He was like one of their first ones, and obviously they didn't keep him. He got picked up by the Colts, and he's back again. I think that's a guy who, likely might not compete for tight end 2, because there might be Jack Stoll might be the number 2, tight end, but number 3 I think is definitely an option, just because I think we already know what Richard Rodgers is at this point. No disrespect, I like Richard Rodgers, but we already know what he is. And Tyree Jackson, he's still hurt, and that was a bummer. Especially he got hurt his first game, he scored a touchdown. So I mean, last season, so that's a bummer, because I think he was just starting to figure it out and come into his own. So I think for me, those are like the 2 guys. Those are the 2 guys that that stood out to me, and that I want to see going forward when they play the Browns this week. And before we jump in to talk about just what we saw from over on week 1, we do have to talk about a little trade that happened. I was about to forget about it, but I was looking at the box score and I saw a name, and I was scrolling down the list, and he had 1 target, and it was none other than wide receiver turned tight end JJ Arcega Whiteside was traded a couple days. What was it? A couple days ago now, or yesterday? What was it? Yesterday he got traded, and my days are getting mixed up. He got traded yesterday. Right, got traded yesterday to the Seattle Seahawks for a versatile defensive back in Ugo Amadi, who's probably probably a player I probably used on Madden when I was using the Seahawks, and over the last couple of years with his versatility and his ball playing skills, and the guy that's actually played some considerable snaps for the Seattle Seahawks. So they get a guy at DB and Amadi who can be versatile, who's played some games, which is good. For a guy in our Arcega-Whiteside, Nick, that for as much as what we saw from him out of Stanford and his ability to go get the ball and kind of like stretch the field to a certain extent, it just never materialized with the Eagles. And it doesn't help either when you look at other wide receivers that were taken in that draft class. DK Metcalf, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, who's now an Eagle, Hollywood Brown. I mean, Darius Slayton. I mean, so you can just name off the list. And he was one of the guys that just never, materialized. And maybe they thought, if you moved the tight end, it was going to work, but it just hasn't clicked for him, with the Eagles so far. And hopefully maybe it clicks with the Seahawks where, they're not very, you can say outside of DK and Lockett, it's kind of open competition for those, last, 3 or 4 spots outside of maybe Dwayne Eskridge, but he's been, banged up dealing with some soft tissue injury. So maybe there's a chance for him to potentially, figure it out, in Seattle where there's likely no expectations this year for him, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that just needed a change of scenery at the very least. At the very least, needed a change of scenery. One career touchdown with the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, just a tremendous disappointment. His time here with Philadelphia. I mean, he just never kind of made that transition from Stanford to the pro level, and it just didn't work out. You thought he had great size, could go up and get maybe some red zone targets, and it just did not happen. He just did not transition well enough to the pro level. And a lot of people had high expectations, especially when you mention the players that were taken in the draft. I mean, ahead of DK Metcalf, it's kind of ironic that he's going to go play with him in Seattle, which is kind of funny. So, but yeah, I mean, this needed to happen, and credit to Howie Roseman trying to find some value instead of just cutting him, trading him to Seattle. I think this is a good move for the Eagles. I mean, you get a guy who can obviously be versatile, and he can also, contribute on special teams. So I think this is, a good job by Howie Roseman to go out and get some value for a player that probably didn't have a ton. And now it's kind of wait and see on Jalen Reagor. I mean, another wide receiver that's had some trouble since entering the league, has not made that jump just yet. Maybe this is the year. Maybe he's on the bubble at this point. I feel like I think he'll make the roster, but Arcega-Whiteside, Reagor. I mean, these wide receivers just have not panned out for the Eagles. And especially when now you have AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, Goddard. I mean, you have all these weapons that Hurts can go to. There was just definitely no more room for Arcega-Whiteside. And, we did put on weight to try and transition to the tight end spot, but it was time.
It definitely was time for them to move on. And like you said, for the fact that Rosen was able to get any type of value for him is incredible, just because he didn't really flash or show much when he, did, get the play. Harrison, just your thoughts on the move. And like Nick said, Nick brought up, Jalen Reagor, another guy who's kind of top, first round pick. And Arcega-Whiteside was second round pick. So we're talking about a first round pick who hasn't materialized, but it seems like he's going to make the roster. But again, he's in a spot where he's likely going to be the number 4, maybe number 5 guy on a loaded wide receiver depth chart that, like you said, they have Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Quez Watkins as a wide receiver number 3. And remember, Quez Watkins was drafted in round 4 in that draft class, because it was Reagor, it was Watkins at 4, John Hightower at 5, and we haven't really seen Hightower. He's just been on the practice squad. So, like I said, Reagor, and now Rager's competing for potential roster spot. Obviously, Zack Pascal, I think, will make the team. So you're looking at those four, solid four. Rager, maybe. We also got factoring Greg Ward, Britton Covey. I know a lot of beat writers are talking about Britton Covey and his returner. Return abilities. It's looking tight. It's looking tight for Rager and his Eagles' future.
Yeah, this is a side note. You mentioned Zack Pascal. I really like Zack Pascal. I thought he looked good in the preseason game. I think he's a nice route runner, smooth route runner. I think he's going to definitely be a playmaker and make plays for the Eagles. Talking about Jalen Rager, it's starting to be a little bit of an uphill battle. I'm still encouraged by Rager. He's very young. He's a dynamic playmaker. You can put him on punt returns. I'm not sure if it's going to be here. How JJ just got traded to Seattle. I think that's a better move for JJ's career. I think Jalen Rager might be better off somewhere else. I think a fresh start, a new offense, a new coaching staff, try to get him the ball some different ways, get him some different looks. I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world at all. But while he's here, I'm not out on Jalen Rager. He's an interesting playmaker. The receiver room, like we've been talking about, is just getting better and better every year. Now they've got Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. Last year, Jalen Rager was really expected to be the two. Quez Watkins was making plays in the slot. You mentioned Quez as well, Jovan. Really nice play to start the game against the Jets the other day. Encouraged to see what Quez can do this year. But for Jalen and JJ, it definitely, has not went how the Eagles would have liked. Nick mentioned it. Credit to Howie Roseman for at least getting some value for JJ Arcega-Whiteside, but still definitely, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you miss on guys like DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin. The list goes on when you really look at between those two picks, the guys that they missed. It definitely is discouraging, but at the end of the day, we're here with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert's a top-tier tight end. Nobody's really concerned about the pass-catching course, so I guess no harm, no foul, but definitely something the Eagles fans and just Eagles, media members alike definitely are going to remember that.
Most definitely. So, hey, we'll see what happens going forward as we continue to move through the preseason. Obviously, we'll have roster cut downs. Eagles did make their round of cuts to get down from 90 to 85. The players that were cut: Jared Maiden, Jimmy Moreland, Ali Fahad, William Dunkel, who I think played in last week's game on the offensive line. Carrick Wheatfall, who we didn't see, but I think he was injured. And we also have Lance Lenore, who was with the USFL's Michigan Panthers. He also got cut. He was one of the, not surprisingly, he was one of the many USFL players that were cut through the first round. So, yeah, we'll likely see a little bit more USFL guys getting cut. But, hey, there's always not only for them, for other NFL players, there's down that vehicle for them to go to the USFL and the XFL. So it's not over yet for those guys. It's still a lot of game to be played, in upcoming months here in the USFL and in the XFL. All right. So we got one more thing we got to talk about on the pod before we wrap up, but appreciate everybody once again, for tuning in, checking out the pod, wherever you're going to be checking out at, either here on Twitch, or, checking out on Spotify, any place where you get your podcast. We appreciate you checking us out and listening and tuning in. We got to talk about one more thing, y'all. It's just looking at the preseason in general. We all like watching preseason just for our teams, but there's also some kind of intrigue, right, of just watching a random preseason game, whether that be Steelers, Seahawks, or, Lions, Falcons, or, Rams, Chargers. Even though nobody's really playing in these games, there's always some weird intrigue, for watching, these games and just seeing what's going on and who's out there and who's, who's making plays. Just want to get your guys' thoughts on, what did you think about the first week of, preseason ball? Was there any players that stood out to you, or, anything that surprised you? Just overall, what did y'all think about it?
Yeah, Jovan, I saw you mentioned in our document, just really good to see a lot of teams letting their young quarterbacks play. I'll echo that sentiment that you've had. Guys like Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett. It was encouraging to see the rookies, the young guys, go out there and get a lot of reps and play well. I think all three of those guys showed flashes, showed potential. None of those guys were perfect. You know what I mean? But it's day one, preseason game one for these guys. We heard a lot of interesting things about the quarterback class this year. I don't hate it. I think there's definitely 4 or 5 guys that are going to make plays in the pros as starting quarterbacks. I think there's guys in this class. I don't think it's as bad as what people thought. But, yeah, like you said, it's just fun to throw preseason games on. You're going to see a lot of different guys, especially having, us as a TSL crew really gotten into the draft process the last few years. It's fun to see guys that we've watched it, maybe the Reese's Senior Bowl, the Combine, the Hula Bowl, things of that nature. It's fun to see them go out in the preseason and play. Was out in Albany this weekend. We got the Buffalo Bills local coverage, so I got a chance to watch that game for a little bit. Christian Benford, Villanova alum, is out there making plays at cornerback, has a legitimate shot to maybe see the field early in the season with the Bills losing some guys. So that's an interesting guy. I'm just trying to think of some other guys off the top of my head. I know
I heard Prince Amelia name being mentioned during the broadcast.
Prince Amelia is definitely making some plays. Real interesting run stuffing defensive tackle. I mean, can you have enough good run stuffing defensive tackles that have the athleticism to rush the passer? So I think Prince Amelia is an interesting one as well. The Bills are always, they have a good defensive line. They're always looking to add some interesting defensive line talent. They had Jake Metz from the Soul back in the day. The Bills always do a good job going out and getting some defensive linemen. But Samuel Womack is the DB that I was watching from the 49ers. He had a really good game. And then Christian Wilkerson from the Patriots was a receiver who caught my eye multiple times, was catching the ball well. So just a few names. I mean, it's fun to watch the preseason. There will be more names that we all learn this week that go out there and make plays. But, yeah, I'm interested to see what, who Nick is interested in.
Yeah, right now, I mean, I looking at some of these guys. One thing in particular is seeing those young quarterbacks, and one player that I'm watching for is Justin Fields. What's going to happen with Justin Fields this season? He got a little bit of time in the preseason game against the Chiefs, 4 for 7, 48 yards, did rush for 10 yards. I'm very intrigued to see what happens at quarterback with the Chicago Bears this season. No more Matt Nagy in Chicago anymore. So, we saw them kind of embrace before the game. Yeah, I listen, I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I want to see him succeed in Chicago. That's one quarterback that I'm really, really looking forward to. He got some time. Trevor Siemian's behind him. We saw, kind of the carousel in Chicago, with Nick Foles, Andy Dalton last season. What happens with Justin Fields? Can he develop? Can he turn into a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL this season? That's the player that I've really been watching. I really paid attention to. I had a lot of baseball going on this weekend, but I did check up on Justin Fields, and that was a name that I was very intrigued to see get some, a decent amount of playing time, similar to Jalen Hurts this weekend. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what Justin Fields can do. How much is he gonna run? How much is he gonna throw? Did his arm talent improve? With the Bears this offseason, and is he ready to make that jump? That's what I'm looking forward to.
The Bears are an interesting case study just from how they went by their offseason and not really addressing the wide receiver room.
No wide receivers.
Very, I don't want to call it disrespectful, but very puzzling for what they didn't do at that position. Obviously, they still have Darnell Mooney, who I think is a very underrated wide receiver in this league. They still have him. They added Byron Pringle, who had a very good year in Kansas City, but now can he translate that to being a number 2 wide receiver in Chicago? That's going to be something to see. They did draft a kid out of Tennessee, Bayless Jones Jr., who they're very high on. Christian NFL, he's high on him in his game. So they got him. They got Equanimous St. Brown, who's Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother. And Equanimous has been in the league for, some years in Green Bay. So he followed Luke Getsy over. So they have some guys over there. N'Keal Harry, who they traded for, but obviously he got hurt. So there's some guys over there. It's just going to be interesting to see, will they give Fields, I guess, the time to make those mistakes as the full-time starter for a season, right? Because he was almost in the same situation we've seen Hurts come in. Even Lamar, when Lamar made his first start, they didn't start day one as the starter. They were kind of made their appearance midway into the season, and we know how Matt Nagy did the quarterback situation last season. It was kind of a rotating door, which was Fields, then it was Andy Dalton, then it was Nick Foles. It was just a constant, shuffling. So hopefully, there are going to be some growing pains, I think, with this Bears team, but hopefully they allow Fields to have those growing pains and give them a shot, to develop that chemistry with their wide receiver unit and and we'll see what happens, on that end of the spectrum. And sticking with quarterbacks, we talked about it, and like Harrison said, piggybacking off of my point that I put in our doc, before the show, I think it was very interesting. I think with preseason, I think it's always interesting to see how coaches kind of maneuver and manage. All right, my starter's not playing, so how are we going to figure out who's quarterbacking or who's going to be starting? And I found it very interesting to see a lot of teams basically say our number 2, number 3 guy, he's going to either play the entire half or he's going to play the whole game. And I think that's very good, because these guys will not get those reps in the regular season. They're going to be, this is the time where they're going to get the most reps, because they're not going to get the reps during the week. Most of the live reps will go to, QB1, whoever that is on that respective team. And I think it was cool to see. I mean, you look at the Cardinals, they didn't start Kyler Murray, but they gave Trace McSorley their starter, as he's competing, for that QB3 job with a rookie quarterback in Jared Guarantano out of Tennessee. And McSorley had a good game, 13 to 22, 163 yards, a touchdown, 32 yards on the ground. People remember him. He was with the Ravens, had a very good career at Penn State, as he still tries to find his way in the league. I also liked what we saw out of Washington. We saw Baker Mayfield, he was solid. Even Darnold was solid. All 4 quarterbacks played in Carolina, and PJ Walker played the most. And PJ is a guy that's been around 10 to 19, 136. I'm interested, honestly, to see what PJ does. Will PJ stay in the league, or will he go, to one of the other leagues where he could potentially just walk in and, be the starter? And then in Washington, we saw Sam Howell. He made some plays, had two rushing TDs, 9 to 16 for 145 yards. That's Harrison's guy right there, Sam Howell, from UNC. So him, I mean, the list goes on and on. I gotta mention Skyler Thompson from Kansas State, a guy who I was high on for a couple years. He played the entire game. Mike McDaniel gave him the entire game, and when I saw that, I was like, wow, there's nobody else starting. You're going to play this entire game, and I think those reps are incredible. And I think out of all the rookie quarterbacks, the fact that he wasn't talked about more and what he did, 20 to 28, passing for 218, a touchdown, had 25 yards on the ground. I mean, we saw Kyle Trask. He played a lot of snaps too, 25 or 33 for 258 eventually, because Tom Brady will eventually stop playing. So need to figure out that situation. Another one, and lastly, another one that caught my attention was the Rams and the Chargers. Rams, not Jared Goff. Oh my Lord. Matthew Stafford. Is obviously not playing in the preseason. John Warford didn't play. So they gave it to Bryce Perkins, a guy who's kind of been with the organization for the last 3 years. They gave him the full reins, and he pretty good. 3 total touchdowns, 39 rushing yards, 133 through the air, 10 to 17. A lot of people, are intrigued by his skill set, thinking, maybe one day he becomes the future quarterback in LA. I mean, that's a long way from here and there, because I honestly think Bryce Perkins could go in the USFL and XFL and be a starter. But that's neither here or there. So I think for me, fellas, that was the thing that caught me by surprise, and I thought that was cool to see, those guys, the Trace McSorleys, the Bryce Perkins, the Skyler Thompsons, getting a lot of playing time in the preseason, because we're used to seeing, all right, such and such is out there for a quarter, next quarter. No, these guys were you're getting full game, half game to play and do and execute the offense like you are the starter.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that Miami film. I didn't know Thompson went 20 for 28. I know that yourself and also Emery Hunt from Football Game Plan were very high on him in the draft process out of Kansas State. He was an interesting quarterback prospect. You mentioned Bryce Perkins, guy at UVA from a few years ago. Like you said, he's been with the Rams for a little bit now. He's really, I think, 3 years in, like you said. Would be interesting to see, if he could be the future of the Rams. I know they like John Wolford as well. He started that postseason game with Jared Goff, right? I think a lot of people forgot about that. Out of the AAF, the Arizona
AAF,
went from AAF football to playoff football in 8 months. It was crazy. yeah, I like Bryce Perkins as well. Always have. People always say there's not that many pro-ready quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a lot of quarterbacks out there. You can find quarterbacks. You mentioned P.J. Walker, who we saw star in the XFL and then start games in the NFL. There's quarterbacks out there. I think that's a little bit overhyped from the media. There might not be, 15 superstar quarterbacks, like people want. There might not be, an amazing Aaron Rodgers on every team, but yeah, I don't think there's a shortage of pro quarterbacks.
There isn't, and I think what teams have to do, and I know that's hard for some of them to do, make some of these young guys your backups. No disrespect to the Chase Daniels and the Nick Foles and the Andy Daltons of the world, but I'd rather have a Bryce Perkins as my QB2 or a Skyler Thompson as my QB2. Just say, hey, if such and such gets hurt, I'm willing to be okay with it. Or Blaine Gabbert. Like, I don't want to see Blaine Gabbert. If anything, Kyle Trask has been down with this team going for 2 years. I'd rather see him as the backup and say, all right, because that's what it should be about. Not so much, all right, here's this retread quarterback, Case Keenum, Matt Barkley. Like, I saw that with the Bills. I'm like, what are we doing here? Obviously, I know Josh Allen is still in his prime, but we don't see that in Baltimore. Baltimore literally is rolling out Lamar, Tyler Huntley, Anthony Brown. I mean, they had Kenji Bahar last year. So, I mean, I think teams have to also look at the quarterback position a different way. I only think certain teams do that.
Anthony Brown's another one we got to shout out. He played really well for Baltimore. I think he was like 12 for 14 in the game. I might be wrong on that, but Anthony Brown played really well. He's a guy with a lot of talent as well. You mentioned it, and we were talking about this during that game, Jovan. He's another one that could go right to the USFL or XFL and start. Maybe he's on the practice squad this year. Maybe he's a team's third quarterback. But I like Anthony Brown's game a lot. I'm interested by him.
For sure. If that's it, then I think we're gonna wrap this bad boy up. Appreciate everybody for tuning into the podcast. Thanks again. With a good one, getting back in the saddle and talking some NFL football as we get ready and gear up for the regular season, which is going to be here obviously before you know it. This is only a matter. It's only a matter of time before for the games really count on a weekly basis, and you'll be hearing our critical thoughts and and get the real emotion. Not saying you didn't get it real here, but it's different speed here when we're talking about talking about the preseason. But again, appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure you check out TotalSportsLive.com. Check out the podcast on all your available platforms: Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you can find it at, it's there. I think pretty much we kind of wrapped it all up. I know Nick, he's doing a lot of good things on his end of the world, end of the planet there, no pun intended. So, Nick, you gotta plug your stuff as always.
Yeah, no, we got a lot going on. Recorded Planet earlier today, so that'll be coming out. So 2 podcasts today, you already know. And then Blue Rock season starting to come to a close. Almost done. A couple of the big prospects got moved up. Robert Hassel III went to AA. Yasel and Tuna. Those guys developing, man. And only got to see Robert Hassel a little bit, but very exciting to see one of the top prospects in baseball. So that was fun. And then Tuna, he's really developed his approach at the plate. I've been really excited about him. So congrats to those guys who got moved up. And then, you can catch me on WIP on the weekends here and there, overnights. I'll be producing here and there. So yeah, it's been a busy month, busy week, I should say too. So but yeah, and then as always, TSL Pod, we got it coming for this season. I can't wait.
Yeah, we do, and it's going to be a good one. I know Harrison, he's been working on some stuff. He's got some stuff in the works. He's been doing interviews and stuff like that, so I want to take his shine away. I got to let him plug away real quick.
Nah, definitely, man. Keeping it busy, keeping working, TSL Pod. You guys can check me out on YouTube, just Harrison Brown-Russo. But just while we got
the vids, man. He got the vids on the YouTube.
Trying my best, but while we got a minute here, Joe, just want to send our condolences and love to Mo Ruffins and his family, former AFL player. Found out that he passed away today. Was a great offensive lineman, tight end in the AFL for years with Albany, Jacksonville. So just want to send our love to him. Rest in peace to Mo. Love to his family, his mom, and all that type of stuff. All the AFL guys, all his teammates. Just wanted to take a second here, just to send our condolences from TSL to Mo Ruffins.
Facts, man. Facts. Mo Ruffins definitely. If you were watching AFL in that mid, 2010s range, he was a name you just knew. Like you said, offensive line tight end, and the AFL was rare to have that guy that could be offensive lineman and be a tight end and be really good at it. And when you know an offensive lineman's name in the AFL, that means they're actually really good. Like most of the guys are just like, all right, yeah, he's an offensive lineman. Like, no, Mo Ruffins was that dude. And, like you said, we send our condolences, to his family, to the AFL family, because, AFL is a very niche group. Just with the players, everybody knows everybody, some of them are still playing the game indoors. So, we send our condolences out to his family and also to the AFL family as well. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up. Everyone have a good one, and we will talk to you guys in the near future. Who knows? We'll pop up with another podcast soon. The Phillies are playing baseball. There's probably going to be October baseball, so we're going to have more in the tuck there. So hey, for me, Harrison, and Nick, everyone have a good one, and we'll talk to you all very soon.